An ancient Oriental story tells of a little fish swimming along the edge of the river. Nearby on the bank, a science teacher has assembled his class for an instruction on water. As the fish swims by the class, he hears the teacher speak. Water is absolutely necessary to life. Without water, you would all perish within a week's time. Golly, says the fish, if what that man said is true, I better find some of that substance called water, or I shall die in a few days. The fish asks every other little fish it sees where water might be found, and none of them know. Then the little fish puts the question to some older, larger fish, but they are more interested in food for the day. Some think he's a little crazy. Go away and let us alone, they say in fish language. From stream to stream, the frightened little fish carries its quest, but in vain, until finally the fish comes upon an older and wiser fish than the rest. Please, where can I find the substance called water that will give me life? Water, replies the wise old fish. You are in water this minute. You are conceived and born in water. Water is your environment. Water supports your very life. Draw on it and you will live. We too are immersed in a precious substance on which our life's fulfillment depends. Like that little fish, we are born and conceived in it. Our lives are sustained by it. We eat, sleep, work, and play in it. We are immersed in it. Like the little fish who couldn't see the water for the river, we fail to recognize it, and we wait longingly to encounter it. And we wait. In theology, the word for this precious, life-giving substance is grace, the grace of God. And in plain language, grace means that God is continually doing for us everything we need to have done for our life's fulfillment, whether we know it or not, whether we appreciate it or not, whether we are worthy of it or not, and whether we recognize it or not. God's grace surrounds us like the water of the little fish. When I first read and started studying the two scriptures for today, the story of Naaman and the mission of the 70, I discovered again, like that little fish, God works all around us without our knowing. And often God works from the margins. In the story of Naaman, who is the commander of the army of the king of Aram, we read of a young girl, a captive of the land of Israel, serving the wife of Naaman. She was courageous enough to speak to Naaman's wife and tell her of the miraculous powers of the prophet who was in Samaria, Elisha. Now Naaman's wife speaks to Naaman, and he in turn speaks to the king of Aram. We might conclude that his desire for the healing of his leprosy was strong enough that he was willing to try anything. The king of Aram then takes upon himself the mission of writing to the king of Israel and sending Naaman to him with gifts of silver, gold, and garments. We could say God's grace was working all around and through the people in the story. God worked through a nameless captive girl, servant girl. God worked through Naaman's nameless wife, and God worked through the king of Aram, also nameless. Now, another marginal person who does have a name is God's next instrument, and that instrument is Elisha. Prophets many times had a difficult time. They were speaking from the edge of society, saying things people don't want to hear. And many times they were in the royal court, which is why the king of Aram wrote to the king of Israel, supposing the prophet was there. The king of Israel tears his clothes, and when receiving the message, Elisha hears of the message and the king's response and tells the king to send Naaman to him. And now, in a blatant example of a lack of hospitality, Naaman is standing at the entrance of Elisha's house with his horses and chariots when Elisha does not come out nor invite him in. Instead, Elisha sends Naaman a message to go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored and you shall be clean. Of course, Naaman is angry and is at his reception, thinking Elisha should have come out to see him, call upon God in some spectacular way, perhaps wave his hand, and heal him. He leaves in a rage. Now, other marginal people, unnamed people, the servants of Naaman, encourage him to go wash. After all, how difficult is it? Naaman does follow their encouragement, goes to the Jordan, washes, and is healed. Throughout the story, we have many unnamed people, often considered to be the margins of society. A captive servant girl, Naaman's wife, and servants of Naaman. All were used as instruments of God. Even a river, Naaman considered marginal. The Jordan was used by God. Pretty spectacular story. The Bible is full of them. And in actuality, if we examine some of the stories of our own lives or lives of others, we might find that God has been working through unnamed people, people perhaps on the margins and in marginal ways, to bring about his will, grace, and life-giving fulfillment in our lives. William Cowper was an English poet and hymnist. He was a contemporary of Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth. He suffered from severe manic depression, and although he found refuge in a fervent evangelical Christianity, he often experienced doubt and feared that he was doomed to eternal damnation. The depression led him to much of the poetry for which he is best remembered, the one we just sang. God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea, and he rides upon the storm. This was reportedly his last hymn, and has a fascinating story, though we're not sure that it's true. One night, Cowper, struggling with depression and doubt, decided to commit suicide by drowning himself. He called the cab and told the driver to take him to the Thames. However, thick fog came down and prevented them from finding the river. Another version of the story has the driver deliberately getting lost. After driving around for a while, the cabbie stopped and let Cowper out. And to Cowper's surprise, he found himself on his own doorstep. God had sent the fog, or the conspiring cabbie, to keep him from killing himself. Even in our blackest moments, God watches over us. Even in our blackest moments, God's grace surrounds us. Our second scripture lesson tells of the mission of the 70. Notice there are no names given to the 70 others, not like the 12 disciples which we know the names of. Most likely these were missionaries and understood as representing all of us. And we are part of the 70 that the Lord